G'day, how's it going? I just want to give you a little premise of the video you're about to watch. First off, I discuss Australia Day, and let me tell you, I've got a bit of a sense of humour, and it's very hard to give you a full perspective in a small video. So don't think it's the entire package. Do your own research after. This is just a little summary. I also talk about my car breaking down, and my issues with my Blue Yeti microphones, and I touch on the beauty of having your partner's relatives stay with you. You get to learn from them. It's an experience, and having those little challenges in life make you grow. And I also touch on the Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson episode, censorship and the roles of the left wing, right wing flipping over the past few decades. This is a very, very heavy topics, and to just casually address them in one take takes a lot of skill, and to not say things that get you buried into a hole. So have in the back of your mind who I am. I'm a human being. I'm a cognitive human being that makes mistakes, and I'm putting myself on the line here for entertainment. So authenticity and honesty are core morals of mine. And so when I do things as one take, it will be riddled with mistakes. But that's just a sign of my humanity. And yes, you may pick holes in that, but that's your God-given right to pick holes in that. Don't you forget it, baby. Good evening, and welcome to the Chevy the Entertainer podcast. It's my working title. I've got a couple topics today. I'm going to start off with Australia Day. So yesterday was January 26th, Australia Day. It's commemorative of Australia being settled by English settlers. And there's a lot of new controversy on that the past few years because people got a lot of time in their hands. And so hating their country is one of their favourite pastimes. So I was taught that, Australia is just so evil because all the Europeans came here and killed all the indigenous. And what the Europeans did to the indigenous was very wrong. The British, they didn't do fair trades with them, and also they bring lots of terrible diseases. And they try to push their Judeo-Christian values onto these people, not necessarily thinking of if that was the right thing for them. But it's a very complicated issue to look back on now, because now we are very rich and we're very comfortable, and we think that we can judge what the English did to Australia. But it's such a different world. Even less than 80 years ago, people were putting people in camps and execution chambers just because they were religiously different and because someone had this strict idea at the time. So it's hard to know how history will perceive what you're doing as evil. The past couple of years, people haven't been able to see their children's faces much with face masks and stuff. So maybe in 50 years' time, that'll be seen as a form of child abuse, because they may not have good facial recognition and they may have real emotional stunt backs. And that can be seen as a huge detriment to society, because people are going to be socially inept. They're going to be more technologically addicted and less empathetic, because human interaction and understanding emotion, you grow to love human beings after spending a lot of time with them, seeing all their flaws, accepting them for who they are. And it's very fashionable to post on your Instagram page that January 26th is the Colonial Day. But most of those people don't really do much for Indigenous. I went to a lot of parties in Rockingham, West Australia when I was a teenager, and there was lots of Aboriginals there, and they were just regular people. We got along really fine. We didn't really treat them any different because they were just our mates, and to make all this big hullabaloo about it and make sure, it's given so much attention, it makes it feel like there was something there that wasn't even there. If you're going to take your wife to marriage counselling all the time and say, look, we need to go to this, you're going to think there's something wrong. You don't just get therapy unless there's something wrong, normally. Couples counselling. And so to constantly say, look, Europeans abused Indigenous, and the Indigenous need reprimands, and they need severe treatment, severe positive treatment to make amends, you're creating a problem that may not necessarily be there. Like, for example, my girlfriend's grandmother, she went through the Holocaust and she seen her brothers die. And so, but now she's very successful. She has a beautiful family. She's got her, she's still very coherent. She loves catering, and she's got a real charming personality. Just loves sense of humor and very bold, like to the point, tell it how it is. But takes care of herself, very feminine, very glamorous, and like very poised in her demeanor. And so she'd come from really rough upbringing. So she had every right to not really take any chances in life and to just be self-orientated and nihilistic. But no, she kept these family values strong, and her cultural values, and she's added a lot to society. And even just meeting her, I grew to respect her. So she's an example of someone who's come from poverty but ended up being rather beneficial to community. So there can be people who come from adverse backgrounds who use that as leverage to encourage their success. So you cannot say that just because of European interception in Indigenous Australian culture, that is the sole rationale for the differences between Indigenous and European or Asian Australian. And also, it's kind of hierarchical and extremely one-sided to even think that you can judge another person's success by how many years they live, how much money they earn, how much children they have. Because someone can live to 30 years old and just live a wild life, just constantly traveling around the country, just seeing live music, having promiscuous one-night stands and telling stories. But then they die of a strange car crash or disease or malnutrition at 30. They can live a way more extensive and fulfilling life than someone who's 90 years old, lives a corporate life and doesn't take any chances and never gets sick, never does anything cheeky, but then dies in a hospital bed after, paying all their taxes all their life. And so we're judging the Indigenous Australians, saying, look, you're not getting as many car loans as us, not as many house loans. You're not living till 90 on medication your past 10 years, so you're not successful. That's racist to me, because what if in their idea of success is different to ours? We're trying to push our ideologies onto another culture. That's something to think about. But to me, if you really wanted to help out the Indigenous, you'd go work out in the outback for a while. Get out of the city, get out of your the comfort of nightclubs and Uber Eats and designer narcotics delivered to your house. Perhaps get out and enjoy the activities and get amongst it, learn their language, and not try and impose your way of living onto others. And it's a bit strange that people are so fashionable with their hate of the European connection to Australia, because it's just really hard to imagine if the English never came to Australia, would there ever be perhaps a Southeast Asian influence? Like, what if the Japanese decided to arrive here in 1942 and there was absolutely never a European landed their foot on Australian soil before? Do you think that the Japanese would have treated the Indigenous Australians with more respect and decency than the British did 300 years earlier? Because the international foreign policy relations of Japan in the middle of last century wasn't exactly of high moral integrity. They were known for having rather malicious, torturous techniques and not much codes of honor. And to be the devil's advocate, I went to South Australia a few years ago, and I went to this museum there, and there was a paying homage to this special nun who made a big influence in the local area, and apparently it's historically noted that a lot of the women and children were very happy with the Christian nuns' influence missionary work on the local communities in the South Australia, because she was very passionate with her love and how much it meant to her, women's rights and children's rights, because it's a core ethic of the Christian values that every life is sanctimonious and should be cherished. And there was some survival techniques from certain indigenous cultures whereby the men would get to eat before the women and children. So that was a very outdated, considering our European standards of community hierarchy. Because we think now, look, women, men and children all deserve the same amount of nutrition, no matter what's available. But I can also see it from the Aboriginal perspective too, because back in the day, before Europeans came to Australia, there was a lot of threats. There could have been, foxes or snakes or spiders or famine, flood, heat wave, other tribes coming over to just attack you. So men were more cherished back then because there was no fence, there was no security guards, there was no state system of police to protect you. So the man of the house was integral. And so it made sense that if he didn't eat, then you got no protection, you got no hunter-gatherers. So it kind of makes sense why he would have to be strong, because he needs to be strong to go out and find food and to protect the family. But obviously it's different in modern Christian world, because there's never a time when men are so relied upon in the family, because you have community. Like Europeans are more settled in one place. They have agriculture, right? Grains or potatoes or grapevines or paddocks of cows and chickens. So we're more settled in one place. And so there's more community aspects. You have your little town, you have a little butcher, baker, candlestick maker, sheriff, things like that. So if someone was to come to your house and steal all your grains and perhaps sexually assault the woman of the house, you don't need to rely on the husband to go out and seek revenge or, to get the grains back. You have community. Not that the Indigenous didn't have community, but that wasn't as settled because they were more hunter-gatherers. So I don't think it's very fair, unless studying Australian history is your real forte, to make much of a comment on the situation, particularly just like an Instagram status. I've seen a lot of people just post just a few words to summarize their views on something that's extremely hot topic, like Australia Day, where you live. It should be something that you take more pride in than Eminem lyrics, or knowing who the cricketer's dating, knowing Bill Gates' latest project. It should be something you've extremely well researched in, because it's where you live. And Australia has a real national identity crisis, where we borrow so much from England, America, and Southeast Asia for who we are. And so we're not very proud. Like, I didn't see any Australian flags yesterday. Katya, my girlfriend, she spent some time in the United States 5 years ago. She said she had seen a lot more American flags as a state of patriotism. And you don't see that here. And it comes down to also to a lack of history. And it's also, people here are a bit too relaxed when it comes down to their core values. They're a bit like a floating flower in the breeze, kind of willing to have their core ideologies just switched and swashed by any Facebook article they see, or any half charismatic TV presenter on The Project or something. Someone who's got all their core political values just on their sleeve, and they project that. They use their platform to promote that to others. Another topic I had written down was car breaking down. So the other day I had my 1998 BMW E39. I was on my way to my little brother's house to help him with his back porch and just to say hello as well. And some reason it just died on the freeway. And I think it might either be fuel, or it could be the battery. It could be a lack of oil, Could be all the above. It also needs a service. But went back there because I had a little note there saying give us a call. And then the highway patrol gentleman called me up, said you got to move it. So I went back and tried to start it, using my girlfriend's car jump start, but to no avail. But they gave me a free tow just off the main road, so it's in a safe place. So it's not going to evade traffic, because obviously it's a threat whereby you could disturb the motorists and cause a freak accident, with many car pile-up, which would be very expensive and bad for Queensland tourism. Also, human life is sacred, right? And I was joking to my brother when he picked me up straight away, saying I kind of enjoyed it a little bit because it was like an invite of tragedy. And even though it's kind of easy to deal with, you get some a strange feeling of calmness wash over you when you go through a small tragedy, because your senses really come alive. You get your instinctual survival instinct to try and, okay, I got to solve this. I can be stranded here, I get hit by a car. This is my horse and carriage. This is how I get from A to B. It's an extremely integral part of my existence. I need to sort this out. All cylinders firing mentally. And so I kind of enjoyed it, but I haven't really rectified the situation yet. But it's like something you can put your cognitive thoughts on. You can just, okay, this is my situation, I'm fixing this, I need to work on this. And other problems can take a step back when you've got a tangible, practical object of concern. So it's very common. People will get excited about strange little problems in their life, and they'll fluff it up out of proportion because it's like a very easy thing to focus on and give everything else to take a step back. So I'll be going back there later on today to pick up the battery, come back and charge it up and see if that's the issue. Also just thinking maybe just having a little break. Sometimes the car just needs a little break, have a little sleep, and then just having a bad day, and then she might be right as rain. But obviously I'm going to get a service before I drive it again, because it's extremely unsafe. Luckily it didn't happen when my girlfriend's parents were here, my fiance's parents. They came over to stay for a month. They came over from Ukraine to Melbourne to Brisbane, and her mum is a school principal, vice principal of a Jewish school. She's been there for 20-30 years. It's her bread and butter. She loves it. She's perfect for it too. She's got the right amount of charisma, but organisational skills. So I just really feel like the children would love to have her as a organiser, or even just a small teaching experience that she still may do. And her father was ex-military. He was in the Air Force for 10 years, a pretty high up position. And it's very interesting having them live with us for a short time, because just got to rub off on their values a little bit, and they always just keep them busy. They always have to have a mission every day. And it's just really nice to see how healthy they are for their age. Like, he's in his early 70s and she's in her mid 60s, and just very inspiring, because when you're in your late 20s or whatever, or early 30s, you can just think, gee, this is almost over. All the best years of my life have gone by. But when you hang out with people who are still fun, party people in the late 60s, early 70s, like, damn, I've got a long road left. So I better not count on my chickens now, and sit in a basket of tears, because I've got lots of crazy stories to go. And I really enjoyed having them here. It was very nice cooking, but I do miss a bit of spices from my cooking. But also, it's very nice seeing your partner happy. Like, having her parents around made her happy, because she had some great company. And so it makes me feel happy to see my partner happy. This is something you should do. It also makes you feel like a real man, because I like having these small little challenges. It's not really a challenge to have people live with you, but it seems very nice to know that I would like the same thing. When I'm in my 60s or 70s, I want to spend time with my children's partner too. I want to see what they're like, their little subtle ways. What are they like after dinner? If they ever hurt their foot, how do they hold their composure? What are they like on walks in the park? Do they get bored easily? Do they find a way to make the most out of things? When they're going shopping, can they make quick decisions, or do they drag on and fill the void in their heart with useless shopping? A lot of things you can gather from someone's personality from actually living with them. Because if you just go on a little dinner date or a little lunch appointment or a small little holiday, you can be on best behaviour. Anyone, I think Jack the Ripper could even be charming for a few minutes or for a dinner. So if you truly want to see someone's good enough for your little boy or girl, you got to live with them for a while. And they can't sneak away to go to work every day. They have to actually be with you, not on work for a month. And then you get to see the true character. So this is my third microphone. I had 2 other microphones, but I've been moving interstate and I've got this condition where I don't really take care of material goods enough. If I psychoanalyze myself, I think it may be because as a child my father was extremely strict on his possessions, so maybe it's my impromptu form of rebellion to not take pride in my belongings. But it does cause me a lot of pain and agony, hence the situation with the car, and hence the fact that I've been neglecting my podcasting duties for a few years because I've had troubleshoot issues with technology. Jordan Peterson was on the Joe Rogan Experience the other day, and it's been a long time since he was on, and I'm a big Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan fan, so I watched it as soon as it came out, and I was pleased with the podcast. But I've got a few observations. I felt like Jordan Peterson was kind of really excited about going there. It felt like he felt an obligation to be extra charismatic, and perhaps because he had so much expectation, he just couldn't be at his best because the emotional baggage kind of overpowered the regular human interaction, because he has so many people coming up to him saying thank you for changing my life. So he's probably thinking, gee, the more charismatic I am in this video and the more good advice I give, and if I be myself and genuine, I may actually save a few more lives. And so it's a lot of pressure. It's a huge amount of pressure because he may over analyze the situation and think, gee, one wrong word could make someone tune in or tune out. And that could be the snowball impact, the ripple effect that ends with someone keeping their life or taking their life. Because he's dealing with a lot of sensitive issues. He's dealing with the main target audience is younger men, and they are the ones who are at high risk of suicide. So it's a very difficult demographic to have. And he's dealing with self-help, and obviously he's a clinical psychologist, so people look up to him as an example of ultimate mental health. But that must be a huge burden to be like the focal figure as someone who's supposed to be excellent mental health conditions, because he's only a human being and his training is only really allowed for one-on-one basis. It's not really representative as like a cult-like figure for millions of people. But he has adapted very well. He learns to read the comments and reapply to them, and he's pretty hip, he's close to his daughter and she's very social, she's very comfortable on social media, so I think they have a very thorough open communication, particularly during dinner when all the best conversations ever arise. So he's hyper connected, and for an elder gentleman, he's extremely modern when it comes to his technological skills. And obviously he has a great team working for him, which is evident by his large amounts of advertisements and paid promotions on Facebook and Instagram. But I get it, because the more he's out there, the more he's going to be exposed to people who he may help. But the issue is, you do lose a bit of credibility when you do advertise too much, because it's rather annoying. And a lot of people spend a bit too much time online, and they're already aware of him, and there's flaws with the advertising platform, because the algorithms are designed to feeds you content that you are interested in, but people who are interested in Jordan Peterson already know about him, and so these initial videos advertising him, it seems like it's not really the appropriate target audience, because having these basic videos of him, like clips from his major talks, it's irrelevant to people that know of him, because they've seen the long form conversation, like 3-4 hour podcasts, and that's where you get the real taste of him. So the repeated exposure effect can actually be detrimental, because it's like, those videos of Save the African Kids with AIDS back in the 90s and 2000s. They show this little boy or girl with a very big bloated stomach because they have some kind of strange disease. And then you see those videos decades later, and what it does in your brain, it creates a sense of hopelessness, because you keep seeing this issue ongoing and it doesn't seem to be much progress. So it can create a sense of apathy in the brain where you just lose any hope that you as an individual can have an impact on this crisis. And so to the advertisers of Joe Rogan's team, the constant exposure of his advertising can just make people think that, is he getting anywhere? Why does he feel the need to constantly expand? He's already got a net worth of $10 million, which on that ballpark. Why is he doing it? He can retire now, but it's because he believes in the product. He wouldn't become a psychologist, in theory, unless his main focus point is he feels he's in debt to society. It's not because of status or financial security why he chose this role. So one would assume his priority is the egocentric feeling of dopamine release, knowing that you've made a difference in a person's life by perhaps exposing them to well-credited theories of, Carl Jung is someone that Jordan Peterson extremely respects, and he edits and revises those ideologies, like the idea of the shadow, the idea of being calm and in touch with your inner wild side, not to reject that, to be totally clinical, like a balance of Apollonian and Dionysian qualities. So if you're just too in the orderly sense of the left brain thinking, then you're not going to be your true authentic self, because you have an emotional, chaotic side, the right side thinking, that you need to be in harmony with. Certain situations you need to be extremely cutthroat, authoritarian and logical. Other times you need to be more intuitive and more emotion-based, because there's never a time, you'll never be able to find a life where you can just get by and that one perspective, because you're going to be inhumane. A part of what makes a human is the fact they are flawed. They have emotions, but they also value order and strategy. So Jordan Peterson, he may think that, look, the more he advertises, the more people it's going to help. But I'm sure he's researched the pros and cons of over-advertising versus under-advertising. But I just think the highly edited nature of his thumbnails, to me, it's a hindrance. But I'm already a huge fan. I've already listened to thousands of hours of his content. Particularly enjoyed the biblical series on YouTube, and obviously the 12 Rules for Life and 12 More Rules for Life, and his Joe Rogan videos, and with Kathy Newman, and he's got an extensive collection. And also just his own personal podcast. He's done a few with his daughter, and he has a lot of English academics. He gets along really well with a British sense of humour, because like Michaela Peterson said in her podcast, that the British, their style is to have a lot of punchlines, but there's not enough gravy on them. They just kind of sneak them in there. Whereas the American style is to be extremely well presented punchlines. So they put all the sauce on there. They stretch it out, like it's ironed out, thinned out to the maximum potential. And so, but the English, they may be more academic in the sense that they have more intellectual humor, but because they haven't promoted it in the obvious and pristine fashion, they can get lost in the system and never get appreciated. So who is the real artist here? Who is the real supreme style, considering one can be lost in the system, or one can be seen as too much gravy. It's just way too saucy. It's a bit try hard. It's a bit too in your face. It's it's a bit plasticky, but that's why a combination of both. Like now we have the internet, you should be able to access the best parts of both cultures. You've got American culture, you've got British culture with their sense of humor, and you can get the best bits and make your own style. It's not like people only learn from their small town idols or go to their local mic stand, open mic to get a taste of the local comedians. You have every single culture on the world available at your fingertips. So the problem is your attention span is so limited now because we have so many distractions. That could be the biggest demon that we face on a daily basis, is to fight for your attention and to be able to access all this information and wisdom to the point you can actually utilize that. Like, we will most likely fail. The hero's journey, which is it's in the Bible, it's in Harry Potter, it's in Lord of the Rings. The theme of someone has to leave the safety of their community, particularly when they're young, and go out and face enemies, perhaps die, and come back a stronger person and spread that knowledge with the community. The main way you can do that is through, it's doing something that's a real challenge. But the problem is, you will most likely fail, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. But just going on your computer now, there's a million distractions. There's beautiful women, there's beautiful men, there's online shopping, there's regular work, there's Domino's Pizza, there's so many things that are fighting for your attention. And so you, as a warrior, have to, like a samurai sword, through the weeds in the Amazon forest. There's mosquitoes everywhere, and there's a strange animal breathing down your neck that's jumping through the trees, and you have to go through there with a rusty old sword and get through that in order, pop-ups, dancing girls, booze adverts, all these things you have to conquer just to keep your focus. I've heard that autistic people are really sought after by the government because they can actually focus on a task extremely to their detriment. So they can forget to eat or drink or go to the bathroom because they're so passionate about completing their task and ongoing. And so that is a real personality trait that they're sought after in employers. And we need a little bit of that, particularly for people, personality type like me, who are high in divergent thinking, where you have a lot of spontaneous, impulsive ideas. So the problem is, 90% of those are pure filth, but 10% of those are gold. But that 10% of gold, you need to know when to decipher that information, block out the rest, and then stay for a year or 2 or 5 years to actually practically make that goal come into fruition. Because that's the greatest gift in this Mother Earth, is the idea of someone having an idea and then making it happen. Like the hospital, the camera, penicillin, sliced bread, all of these things. Someone just sat there in a chair and be like, bro, you know how good bread is, right? Yeah. How can we make it better? What if you give them it already cut so they can just put it straight in the toaster? It's a bloody good idea, right? So imagine those people that just thought about that, didn't make it happen. The real hero is not the person who made the idea, it's the person that practically went to a business plan, went to ANZ, said, listen, I've got a business plan here. I want you give me $500,000. I'm going to go buy a warehouse, get some staff, marketing team, get the business licensing, and I'm going to make a bread factory where I pre-slice this bread. And they're going to put everything on their line. They're going to have their wife or their husband or their life partner or the babysitter or their mother or father tell them, look, you're crazy. What are you doing? Go become a lawyer like Jimmy did. That's just, you can build a safe life that way. But no. Shanine, she decided to make the world's first sliced bread factory. And that is a hero right there, someone that can put pen to paper and make a tangible decision to actually make that sliced bread business. It's all very well having these colourful ideas of what you're going to do for the world, how you're going to improve mental health, how you're going to make that beautiful song, make that beautiful recipe, comment on that sports But if you don't actually put pen to paper and make it happen, or get the people involved who can help you, it's the death. It's the death of an experience, because that is something that could have changed the world just in that small little community. But you didn't make that happen. That's the murder. You've just murdered a whole lifestyle. All those jobs that could have been there, they're gone. And how much culture would have changed if you just made that sliced bread? People have so much more time for convenience. They could have wrote a book, instead of spending all their time just carving this rye loaf, for their avocado and Vegemite with their morning soy latte. But no, because so you got to think it's not just about you with your goals. Sometimes you got to think about the community impact. So Jordan Peterson, he's very well dressed, and he's had a lot of flack lately. People are constantly trying to put him down. And we have to remember, there's a lot of online trolls out there that are not even human. There may be companies out there with vested interest in making him unsuccessful, trying to make his self-esteem in the mud. And they can do that by making all these fake accounts to write all this shit-stirring about him in order to make people just stir the pot, just put a little whiff into the air, a little aroma, a little cooking flavour of, Jordan Peterson's an asshole. He's not very bright. He's a has-been. He's washed up. They can just, like that Will Smith movie where he put all these little cues out there to make the Asian gambler choose that certain footballer. Throughout the day, they put all these little cues to make sure he chooses this option. So if you had a really vested interest in keeping Jordan Peterson down, you could control the YouTube comments, Twitter comments, things like that, to be extremely anti-Jordan Peterson. You can, and that will, if people just come home from work, they're half asleep, they had 3 coffees in the morning, so their brain's like, zzz, 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 and the only time they check their phone at the end of the day, and they're just like half exhausted. So they go up and they say, my view on Jordan Peterson is not what he used to be. Well, I've seen that a few times. I've seen a few people say that. But who's to know if I can go with my life without having that influence just stay with me in my subconscious mind? Because when I see videos of him now, he's extremely eloquent. He's got such poise, such character, such grace. He seems so genuine from the heart. And he speaks at just a level that it's just a bit too smart to comprehend, but you can still hope to be at that level. So you can get like 90% of what he's saying, 80%, but he doesn't say so simply that you feel like he's just being daft. But he doesn't speak too in code that you can't grasp the concepts at all. But it's hard to know if I've been so affected by these little videos that I do not have negative views about him. Maybe they've already influenced me. And because he looks a little bit older now, because he's obviously been in a coma for a while, that will make me view him badly as well. Just because he's not as handsome as he used to be, because he's had such a traumatic experience being in a coma and everything. And also, because a lot of people aren't that successful, like myself, I know I have a lot of achievement to go that I haven't reached. And so there's expectation of where I should be in life, and there's where I am, and if they're not meeting, that's going to create cognitive dissonance, and it's going to cause heartache. And I'm looking for someone to externalize that onto. So I can't really choose my partner. My parents are gone, they're not nearby. I haven't got many friends, and I've been so used to social distancing, I don't know who to exert that to. And so having someone on a little screen, it's like, it's so easy for me to think Jordan Peterson is the reason I'm not successful. And so I can just take out all my inner angst by being on the side of the people criticizing him. And because he's hot topic, you feel like you're a part of something. Like, I've got my team. I feel like I'm connected to someone by having a stance on him. And so, even if I don't think he's that much of a bad person, because you can see he's just like a friendly elderly man, I will purposely choose a side just to justify my own existence. So it actually says a lot more about yourself if you have a strong opinion on someone like him. unless you've actually done thousands of hours of research, you can't really have an articulate opinion on it, because he's so complicated and so much depth. To view a few-minute video of him pass judgment is just really disrespectful. It's like just literally trying one bite of a curry and thinking, oh, I don't like spicy food. No. I remember back in 1999, I tried a beef vindaloo in the back of a truck, and it wasn't very delicious. So now, 2022, I refuse to have that experience again. But you change, your taste buds change. That could have been a bad experience. So you're being unethical to base your whole view on spicy food on that one experience. And because Jordan Peterson has made himself vocally supportive of more the conservative right-wing ideologies politically, that goes out of line with big tech, because it is a statistical fact that the search engines and algorithms, which are man-made and man-tailored, are radically pro-left in their beliefs and their favoritism. So if you just type in like Trump versus Hillary, you're going to get significant differences, not just because of the content of the individuals, but based on the search engine's agenda to try and make an impact on the undecided people with their research. Like I remember just before the elections in 2020, you could go to Twitter and just type in the word racist and Donald Trump would come up. Or you could just type in www.antifa.com and Joe Biden would come up just on the search engine. So there's definitely some vested interest in promoting certain political parties. And so Jordan Peterson has come across very dangerous quicksand, dangerous territory, by simply vocalizing some discussion about the political issues facing Canada and North America and just the world in general, because the world's very globalized and hyper-connected now. There isn't too much difference in each country because we all look to each other for guidance, particularly because we're not talking to our neighbours as much, we're not having as many gatherings and actually communicating in a humane fashion. We are looking to international news for guidance. And I've noticed like Americans had quite a fascination with Australia the past few years because they're hungry for news, and people have become way more addicted to news lately because it's so dramatic, and I feel like we're connected to that. And a lot of people felt like they have an obligation to follow the news, considering all the issues with the restrictions. People feel indebted. They feel like a moral responsibility as part of the local community to watch the corporate mainstream news on the free-to-air television on a nightly basis, which has given them huge amounts of power. And so I think Jordan Peterson has thought about this for years because he wasn't getting political at all for a long time. And a lot of people were saying, "Where are you, JP? Jordan, we need you right now." Because he's someone who seems to put his heart in his sleeve. It's got him in trouble sometimes, but whatever you say about him, love him, hate him, you can't say he's not genuine. Even if you may think him a bit rash, you may think him a little conservative, but you cannot say he's not genuine. And so people have been so desperate for some genuine content that Jordan Peterson was extra respected in these times of peril. And I think he's done very well in remaining neutral. I know his technique was that he did not want to make a huge public opinion on the pandemic because he wanted his content to be of interest years and decades later, because he's noticed his past content from 5 years ago, like the biblical series, is extremely relative now. It's timeless, hasn't really aged. And same with like his psychological theories. They're pretty cement still. And he's looking in the long term. He doesn't want to be a one-hit wonder when it comes to political commentary. He wants to be cross-culturally and intergenerationally valid. So I can see his defense why he hasn't chimed in. And also, Of course, if you're stepping on some toes, you're going to be messing with a few high-powered corporations if you get involved in the current situation. So you have to be willing to put your life on the line and your family's life, because there's a statistical account for times when people have been assassinated for speaking out against politics. So you have to have a lot of moral integrity to want to get involved. And you can see in his videos, like in his eyes, this seems really genuine. And I'm sure he will not feel like he has no choice unless he does get involved. I'm sure he'd love to just play remote-controlled cars and eat exotic steaks and sign autographs in his little mansions. But that's not meaningful for someone like him. You can just tell by his work that he's not easily stimulated. He needs to have a lot of high-stress activities. Because, your brain is like a muscle. If he's constantly used to stressing it out, it's going to be a form of torture to just have no stimulation later on. And debate and arguments, that's a sign of real conversation, because if you're just agreeing with people, that's not really being genuine then, is it? Because if you constantly agree with someone, you're not going to be putting your heart in the sleeve, because it's just a genuine human interaction that you're going to have some points of conflict about. Joe Rogan's response to Jordan Peterson, I also feel like because Jordan Peterson is strangely polarizing and he has so much impact and he has dipped his toes into the political sphere lately, Joe Rogan has to be very conscious of not having any right-wing sympathies, because that will just reduce his audience straight out. And there's just so much hate towards people who have right-wing ideologies they hold dear that it's extremely bad business. I know that apparently most Trump supporters are fearful to even admit they had a little cushion in their heart for that man a few years ago. Like, they can't even admit it. 50% of people voted for him, at least in the 2016 election. But then people are so embarrassed to say that because their brains have been affected by the mainstream corporate media that have told you that you're a buffoon and you're like an old clown with a over big suit, and you're just pulling your hair out and you're just stuffing fast food into your face if you like Donald Trump, which is absurd because everyone's so nuanced. And Hillary Clinton has extreme character flaws. So to judge a political party by their leader isn't really fair, considering people are so nuanced and there's so much baggage about it. And Hollywood as well. People who really respect, particularly old people like 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, they really respect Hollywood. And Hollywood has a huge hands in the political party. And it's obvious that it's neo-Marxist and communist sympathizing regime, because that would, one group to have all the power makes utmost sense, because the filmmaking industry has always had partnership with the government. You can look at these cheesy movies from Soviet Union and America in the 1940s and 50s and see just how poor and how obvious it was, these propaganda films. But obviously now there's a lot more intellectual and sneaky propaganda in films and music to try and influence you to think a certain way, to make certain people profitable. Like at Google, for example, they say we want people to align with our company values and don't be evil, but to have the power to decide what is evil and what is not, that's the most powerful thing you can have in this whole world. And it should be up to debate, constantly changing, because like Neil deGrasse Tyson said on Joe Rogan once, the definition of word is not based on Oxford Dictionary, it's based on what the cultural ideal is at the time. So the word itself, evil, has so much baggage, and it morphs due to globalization and time and climatic changes and dietary changes which affect how do we get high? Is it coffee based? Is it booze based? Is it exercise? Is it self-esteem base from Instagram? How do we get our kicks? That's all going to define evil differently as well. So I understand where Joe Rogan's coming from when he's been very critical of Jordan Peterson. Now he's been more in the open with his right-wing respect. Because Joe Rogan, it's himself, he knows that there is flaws of both party, but the flaws of the right-wing party seem more dirty because they're told as being that they're like ruffian, outdoorsy, perhaps less educated and heavily gun and homophobic. And the left wing are famous for being like artsy and inner city and very focused on fashion and extremely focused on helping the minorities, as in blacks, gays, trans, Asians, women, children, criminals. That's how they get their pleasure, at the focus point of existence. And so just those two little descriptions of left wing versus right wing, of course, you're going to feel embarrassed to have any kind of sympathy for right wing. But what they don't teach you in these big corporate mainstream news shows, which brainwash you how to act, including Joe Rogan, is that, you know, in his childhood, the family cemented in there from intergenerations, because in the 60s and 70s, the radical left wing had so much going on. They were extremely free speech based. They were extremely individual rights based and my body, my choice. And so now it's really flipped. 2022, the right wing is the number one champion for free speech. Like Candace Owen, she will say, look, I want anyone to make fun of me. Say all the crass humor you want, but she'll defend to death your right to say malicious things about her, because that's what makes the free West a great place, is the idea that your art form can be cheeky, it can be mean. And so she accepts that. She accepts the criticism of her, because that's, if you're willing to offend people, that's when you're having a real conversation. Like, you know, Butters. Oh, sorry, there's a character, hey Jimmy, from South Park, he's got disability. You know, they made a joke that in the future censorship is going to be so strong that, hey guys, what do you think about Chinese food? Yeah, it's delicious, right? Like, that's not even a joke. You can't. That's the danger of the future, is that if we just totally bow down and listen to the radical left-wing values, we're going to have so much censorship that it's going to kill art and kill humor. And that's very dangerous, because they're some of the most important things on this earth. Like, I know myself, when I was had a teenager with depression, like music and art and film and comedy, that's what kept me going. It was my bread and butter. It was my core existence. It was like my religion. It was my family. It was my friends. And to take that away, to take away good art, you're going to take away people's lifeline. That's their insulin. That's their insulin injection. That's their respirator. That's their asthma inhaler, is their art. And so you can't take that away from people. So the left wing, with their censorship, a lot of it comes from the purest intentions. But you have to think, it's usually a middle-class phenomenon when these Marxist ideologies really work. Because outside RMIT University in Melbourne, you see a lot of students who are really pro-communism. But you'd never see working-class immigrants who are really pro-communism, because they understand that they don't want the little guy to be always working for one person. Like, if the government owns every business, they can have all monopoly and control over who can work. So let's say if your political ideologies are not with the current leader, they can say you can't work for any business, because they control the communist Chinese people. Every single business that for profit has to have ties to the government. And so there will be strangleholds on what you can say if it doesn't align with the current political regime. And that may be the reason why China isn't the most famous for their music and comedy and film industry internationally. Because you need a place like America where they have the best and the worst of everything. Yes, they might have a lot of trashy movies, hypersexuality, booze and cigarettes are really cheap, fast food's really cheap. But that freedom for failure also gave them the freedom of the world's greatest artists and directors and filmmakers and authors, Hemingway and Kubrick. Without these people, the personalities of the average person would be more dull. Because you see in the everyman, the every person these days has gotten more arty, more intellectual. It's because of the ripple effect of good quality art shining through. And that comes down from freedom of speech. And it's very interesting how they have flipped, in the 60s, 70s, how the left wing was the proponents of free speech, and now it's the right wing. Because technological changes have made a huge impact, particularly since the pandemic, that people put their political ideologies as a religious foundation. I'm pretty sure it was Chomsky. It was a very famous intellect that stated and done academic studies that prove that human beings have the capacity to worship religion in our brains. Every culture in the world has some kind of godlike creature that they worship, some core values that they cling to just to get them through the day. It makes sense in our heart. And because organized religion has been pushed away, there is still that capacity in our brains to worship something. And people feel like, I don't worship anything. I just like love and truth and makeup. But that's not true. There's something that you will worship. And particularly young people, they can be controlled what they worship. And so politics, before you even know much about it, you haven't had much lived experience, you can make it your everything. And you feel like your beliefs, that they're you. That's like a warm hug, If you think you're aligned with the political party, every time you go online and you argue with people with opposing views, you find people who have your views as well, and then you get closer to them, and it's like just more of a grip, and every time you get more confirmed, and the algorithms are designed to make you argue more on social media, so you just get firmer and firmer trapped into this system, particularly when you can't go out and have face-to-face conversation. You're more likely to just seek out that little outburst because it's addictive, and it's just so easy with this beautifully smooth phone. It's just so easy to get the ideas sucked into your head. Like, you're in a comfortable place, you're in your home, you're really cozy, you're in a nice chair, you've got a beautiful woman to look at, you're going to believe things, you're at a trusting state, you're at your most vulnerable. When you're lonely at the end of the night and you're really sad and you've got a caffeine come down, that little phone, that's your daddy, that's your bestie, that's your mama, that's your best friend. And you do what your best friend tells you when you're having sleepovers and you're a bit tired, you had a bit too much to eat at dinner and you're feeling a bit sleepy. That's when your brain's most receptive to information. And so people are going to be so shocked that someone ever puts evidence that maybe some of their beliefs need tuning, because they've been so comfortable and they've been absorbing their beliefs. And so now, if someone ever wants to debate the core political beliefs, it's like you want to argue with who they are as a woman or as a man. And you got to think, that must be extremely confronting to have someone, a stranger, have the audacity to want to fight with your core values. That's basically like the devil. And if you're middle class, you've never had any real problems. You've never got stuck in the desert. You've never known what it's like to not have plumbing. You've never known what it's like to see your mother die of AIDS in front of you and no one care. So that will really hurt. If you've lived a kept life, having someone say some words that conflict with your values will hurt, because you haven't had any real challenges. And challenges are addictive because it gets all your neurons firing, all your instincts. Of course, problem solving is going to be the most desirable because, I mean, a life with no threats is not a life worth living, right? It's not how we're supposed to be. We're always supposed to have people trying to rip us off and try and kill us. That's just how life is. Yes, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if there's anything that you particularly enjoyed, because feedback is the art of learning and growth.